So I must tell you, I adore and respect each and every one of these people on this panel. They are amazing leaders. So I'm going to start with a really hard question for them. Are you ready? I would like to know an interesting factoid about you that nobody else knows perhaps in this room. Rebecca, why don't you go first?
I lived with members of a band called the Dead Kennedys.
Ooh, that's a good one.
In the 70s, so, yeah.
You said you were in the band?
No, just lived with the band members. I carried their stuff, you know.
Oh, you were a roadie?
I was a groupie.
Oh, man. Well, everybody's heard me talk all day long, so they know a lot more about me now. But I guess I'm a grandma of a 2-year-old.
Wow, awesome.
Wow, that's great.
And then I'll one-up Paula, and I am a grandfather of 2.
Aw,
No way.
There you go.
I got one on the way, though.
Even it up.
In about 3 months, we'll be even.
Oh man, I don't know. That's a hard question. I mean, and it's really like,
Tell them one of your previous careers. I know a few
No.
things about you, Tawny.
oh, my previous career? I don't know. When I was in high school, I got my pilot's license.
There you go.
And that always surprises people that I stopped flying in 1997. Just, it's expensive, and if you don't do it all the time, you have no business doing it if you want to live. So that's kind of a fun fact. I was going to talk about me being a professional dancer, but then I remember that was McKenna.
Oh. All right, so I'm going to start with
that
the real
true,
questions.
McKenna?
No, I was never
Okay.
professional. I was a professional model for half a second in the 80s. Anyway, you all have worked or work currently in high-volume shelters that are near or have exceeded 80%. What new issues start to emerge when you hit that 80% threshold, when you're trying to get to the next level? And what groups of animals are most at risk in your organization when you are around that 80% threshold? I'm going to ask Rebecca to start.
Oh, thanks. I think the thing that started to really become more apparent was the disease issues. The more animals the less animals that were euthanized, the more seemed to become ill in our care. And that's something that we continue to struggle with, particularly with kittens that are, 2 or 3 days old. So I think that's one of the issues. It becomes a lot more resource intensive after 80%. I think, I don't want to say getting to 80% is easy, because it isn't. There are some things that you can do to accelerate to getting to 80, but from 80 to 90 has really been a challenge. I also thought when we hit 90% and sustained it for a few months that we were there, and we weren't able to sustain it. So it's still elusive to sustain it.
I get that. Anybody else want to answer that one? Ed?
Yeah, if I could throw in, you have to get really strategic. And there, when a much larger percentage is being euthanized, you'll do anything you can to get any segment out. Some of my rescue partners from Dallas are here, who they had to change their model. Animals that they used to have to rescue, we didn't need them to rescue as our adoption programs got better. And it's hard because you don't want them to think you're not appreciative, and you still need their work. But then they needed to look to a harder segment of animal. So one of the first things we did in Dallas was really look at what wasn't getting out. Just last year we realized, it was around this time of the year, we didn't have any cats. And I'm like, I see this end-all number here for, looking back historically. And they're like, oh, just wait, Director, it's going to start raining cats in here. So we threw together, and they said the hardest thing was keeping them alive, the neonates. And we looked, and there were 2,500 neonatals that were euthanized the previous year. So that was just a big section that we were able to say, let's try to target something, in that range. And we were able to save about half of them. Dr. Jefferson says it all the time, kittens try to die. It's really hard, but, in learning in your first year, you learn from that, and we're actually, I'm not saying we're looking forward to kitten season, but we feel we're much more prepared. And then another number that people don't want to look at, that to me, you can call the live release rate whatever you want, and people calculate all over the place, but to me, the animals euthanized for space, legitimate and euthanized for space. I don't think that people report that accurately because they get shamed. We do. I had some staff cry when I said, no, you're going to report that accurately. That's the number that needs to be 0. Because if you're truly not euthanizing any for space, then that means if you did have to euthanize, you had what was in your capacity or, you know, what was able to get out. So you really have to be strategic at what you're trying to save.
I was going to say that when I came to Fairfax County, Virginia, the save rate, live release rate, we called it, was about 78. And the pets that were dying, I try not to use the word animal, and I know they're animals, I get it. The pets that were dying were healthy cats that were being accepted in traps at the counter because they're pooping in somebody's flower pot or peeing on their deck. And so we were saying, okay, thanks a lot. Or we were picking them up in the field, so we stopped it. And then the other ones were all the pit bull dogs, and pit bull type dogs, blocky-headed dogs. And that's because we had like 6 things you had to do to adopt one. Be over 25, own your own home, have a fenced yard, have special insurance, take a class. And so people would fall in love with the dog, and then they couldn't take the dog home. And so it wasn't easy, but changed that policy, and we immediately stopped killing all those dogs when that policy got changed, but had to do some legwork on that, right? Had to work through the chain of command with the police department, had to work with the county executive. Because think about it, we didn't realize it. By making people do all those things and take a class, we were saying, okay, it's going to be okay now. You got a fence, you're over 25, you own your house, got your special insurance, you took your class. So if something happened, they could come back and say, it's not okay. This happened because we can't predict the future. So pit bull type dogs, healthy cats, that was just so crazy. Healthy wildlife, we were accepting it. We were like the exterminator with disposal. Mm-hmm. Like someone moved next to a park because it helped with their property values, and then they got pissed there was like a groundhog running through their backyard or raccoon or something because their trash can lid wasn't on right. And then so that was the 80 piece. Then we started looking more granular at neonates and started talking about fostering. But at 80, that's what we were looking at that point in time.
I think for us that when we hit 80% actually happened under my watch. So when we hit that, we saw the length of stay increase because we were saving more and capacity issues arise. That we previously hadn't seen, especially in the winter months. We're like double what we were last winter. And the second thing is our intake actually increased. We're working on improving that, but intake did increase. The community was very aware of where we were, and a lot of the intake we think increased is a consequence of our own improvement. They're thinking that the animal services is a safe place now to take the pets. And we saw quite a bit of intake increase. So those are 2 things that I saw that weren't already mentioned.
So the next question is about large dogs. So many organizations, when they hit 80%, start to talk about the challenges of saving the medium and the large dogs with length of stay that's over 30 days. Have you all had to tackle this issue quite yet, or how do you all handle that in your shelters? Is it a problem?
I mean, that's our main problem. I think that, Ed hit on it a little bit, that, and you did too, we rely a lot on rescue partners to help us, and they're the better we do, the more reluctant they are to help us, because they want to go onto shelters where they feel like the animals are more at risk, and if they don't help us, then they're more at risk with us. So, and that particular kind of dog, it's not only do those dogs have longer length of stay with us, but they have a longer length of stay with everyone, and so people are more reluctant to help with the animals that really need the most help. So that's something that we struggled with a lot. Our current answer is increasing our foster program. and increasing enrichment inside the shelter with dogs playing for life and other enrichment activities. But that is definitely a challenge. If we solve it, we're home free.
Rebecca hit it. That started when I was in Cleveland. Very, very quickly, I saw the way our rescue stuff was set up. They could get every non-blocky head out, and we just had, a shelter full of blocky heads. And even though we built the volunteer program up, I believe one of the best in the country, just taking the dogs out for walks were not enough for a very poorly built, old shelter. And that's when I finally opened my eyes up to say, all right, we've got to find something out. And I asked Dogs Playing for Life to come. That was just single-handed for big dogs. If you're in any kind of a shelter that has a large capacity, it's the absolute best bang for the buck to get those animals to run energy. Our rescue groups love it because we can send them a video of the dog playing with other dogs. And that was one of the first things that I brought to Dallas. I think we had them in less than 2 months after I got into Dallas, and we knew we needed to do that.
As we got closer to 80, the big dogs were really an issue, and actually I saw it on Dr. Jefferson's first presentation she gave. She shows our outdoor kennels. We actually built those on a very shoestring budget really fast. In less than a month, we built 50 really large, I call them dugouts. If you've seen a baseball dugout, they're that big. To help us find a temporary location for the dogs, everything else that everyone said I agree with, but one additional thing is that we also started letting our staff get creative on adoption events for those dogs, and to do special events, special media, get the word out. They have the one, I Like Big Mutts, I cannot lie. They had that song. They did that one.
You can sing it for us.
I like big. No, I'm not doing that. And then the other, I'm not the person that does that. The other thing they did, what I authorized was to, when we have a certain amount of the big ones, we actually waive all the fees for the adoption, and just try to get the dogs into homes.
Yeah.
We were talking about length of stay, and I remember in Fairfax this happened to me, and it happened to me in Austin too, but people would inevitably ask why we had so many blocky-headed dogs or pit bull dogs, and I wasn't being a smart aleck, but I was really trying to be honest. I would say because they're alive. And guys looking at me, I remember one guy in particular, he's like, what? I go, we have so many because they're alive, because they're popular. And then I led the conversation about many shelters and some communities have bans, and youth and pets' lives for space. And so we know that, if we're not gonna be ending pets and calling it euthanasia, and that's not accurate, but ending pets' lives for space, we know that's not appropriate. Who wants to do that? It's done, but nobody wants to do it. So that's the crazy part. My recommendation, on my experience, if you had me, I'm with Best Friends now, but if I was a municipal director again, first thing I would do, and we did a little bit of this in Austin and in Fairfax on the smaller level, is every dog and cat had a plan and had a champion. There was somebody there that was helping manage them like their caseworker, and it could be anybody. It didn't have to be animal care. It could be the vet tech. It could be the front office staff. It could be the people that cleaned the building. In Fairfax, we had people that came in and cleaned. It could be volunteers, and that was they had 5 dogs and they were managing their case, and they would make sure that we got cute pictures of them, not in the kennel. And so I think when you're having a length of stay issue, the first thing I would look at is what kind of plans do you have for every single pet. If you don't have a plan and you're not looking at it every couple of days, every week, hey, we better get this guy into foster. He's not doing so hot. He's been here a long time. One thing we found out in Austin that was crazy is we found out what kennels had the shortest length of stay. There were certain kennels on the property that had the highest amount of adoptions. Now, Austin's pretty big, right? The campus is pretty big because we have 16,000 animals. But I bet you if you do an analysis of your building and your kennels, and I mean, Disney's great at this. They can tell you how many feet somebody will walk before they will drop a piece of trash on the ground. And so they strategically locate their trash cans. Same thing with their retail and their food. So in sheltering, we can do that. You can have a volunteer do that for you. You can look in your reports and figure that out. So if you're having a length of stay issue when you hit 80 and you're not killing animals for space, what you want to start looking at is you've got to have plans for them, particularly ones that don't present well inside of a shelter. It's very institutional. Think about that. I get nervous going to the DMV. I mean, anything that's institutional is going to change the way people feel in that experience.
So the next one is one that a lot of shelters deal with is obviously the very young puppies and kittens that come into the shelter that end up getting sick or too young without a mother. So the question is, what can shelters do to help save more of these young animals without extensive medical expenses? Does anyone have experience with that? Yeah, Ed?
We do. In Texas, the state doesn't mandate what the hold times are for animals. In Dallas, in the animal world, is probably a decade behind the times on things. So we realized that we had the ability to have control over how long animals are held. And so we talked to our peer cities just to get an idea. We didn't want to be the only ones doing something. But we had a 10-day hold if they had any kind of identification, even if it was no good identification. There was nothing for younger animals. So last summer, we took data showing what the likelihood of animals being claimed between their ages as well as how long they were there. And neonates, it was like 2 out of 4,000 or something. I mean, it was insane, the number that don't get claimed. You don't lose a litter of kittens. And so we took this to our council and told them, and of course they go, oh, you just want to kill them faster. I said, yeah, that's why I have this job, so I can do that. We said, no, and we actually showed them the amount of cage space that we would create by shortening these hold times. Now, mind you, my number one goal is to get animals back to their owner. I'm the RTO guy. I love RTOs. We've increased them like 265% over the last 5 years. We love that's the best bet. But sometimes you can't find an owner. Many times you can't find an owner. So when we did I was surprised I didn't have to, whenever you go to a council, you start with your starting point and you're prepared to back off or to find more.
Right.
And we had no hold times for puppies and kittens. And they said, okay. I was like, all right, cool. So I was prepared to go, all right, it said 3 months or so. We use it 6 months and under. Our practices for 6 months to 3 months, we hold for a day unless we're over capacity. And we immediately start marketing to the rescue groups. And so it's really helpful for them. They're usually the ones taking those younger animals anyway. And when they had to wait 3 days, 5 days, we had all these different wacky holds. We can start looking for that positive disposition
That's
as soon as they come in.
That is awesome. Hey, real quick, Ed, I'm told to ask you about your return to owner rate in the field.
It's insane.
And no, what is it?
We're running at over 40%.
Yeah, that's pretty, yeah.
For those who don't know, Dallas, it does have a loose dog problem. There's no, you can't put your head in the sand on that. There are dogs running all over the place, and we're getting better. What I found is they're not pack dogs. I mean, on occasion, but they're mostly owned dogs. And so when my officers have this charge from city council, they have to deal with every loose dog they see. The next best thing, instead of crying about it, is we now challenge them on return to owners in field. So we're running at about a 40%.
Is that 40% of your intake you're
no,
returning
that's
to owner?
40%
Your
of
strays.
40% of the loose dogs picked up in the field.
Go back in the field.
Oh,
Don't come into a shelter.
wow, that's awesome.
That's
huge,
Yeah.
That's pretty tight.
That's really awesome. Y'all do that.
Anybody else want to talk about the puppies or kittens? I'd love that, Ed. That's a really good idea about just getting them straight into rescue as quickly as possible.
And, I think that I feel like at this point in the conference, we should, I don't know, make jokes or something. I mean, I think fosters is obvious for
Yeah.
that. And so there's some of the things that we don't really have more information to add. So if McKenna would do some interpretive dance for it. No.
I think I did want to say something. I think that Ed, what you shared was awesome. I think, you know, pets don't belong in shelters. We know that. They belong in homes with people. And I think especially puppies and kittens don't belong in shelters. And it's like, to me, again, if I was back in municipal sheltering, depending on where I was plunked down or what the circumstances where I was dealing with, I would do everything, in which I think we are doing it, to keep juvenile animals that are susceptible to sickness and out of the shelter completely through rescue and foster. Like, just, that's the rule. They're not even coming into the building somehow. Which seems like that would just be, you know, and we did do things like that. And so you know, the stray holds for, like you were saying, who loses a litter of kittens?
Litter of kittens.
Yeah, so that makes a ton of sense.
The only thing that I would like to add, that we've done for kittens especially, is we have an agreement with our Humane Society, which is really close by. And the agreement specifically states that they take all of our puppies and kittens. And we actually spent some capital funding that we had with the city to help build them the kitten and puppy nursery. So it did take some expense from the city, but now they're the ones that are, and believe you me, I don't just do the live release rate based on animal services. We look at the whole community. So if the puppies and kittens die there, it still affects our live release rate, but they're actually providing that extra care that they need, or they're helping us with foster. So it's a good relationship for that part of our population.
We did use them. I did want to say something about something we did interesting in Fairfax, is every Saturday we had puppies. And we would put them on, you know, we would lead up to the weekend and have them on social media, on Facebook, that the puppies were coming. And we worked with other communities that didn't have robust adoption programs. And we had intentional, strategic, collaborative partnerships. You know, we wanted them to you know, have spay-neuter programs in their community and not a source for other people. But that wasn't the purpose of the partnership. But these were communities that just had volunteers running their shelter. And so this is Virginia. And so there were parts of rural Virginia, if hunting dogs didn't hunt, they just would drive off and leave them out there, the hounds. And, but we had communities that we worked with, and actually Washington Humane Society and other partnerships. But we would have like 6 or 8 puppies in there on a Saturday, and the line would be like a block. And then people would come in, and if they didn't get a puppy, we wouldn't let them leave. They got to walk through the whole shelter and see all the adult dogs and all the amazing other pets that were there, and tried to convert them into a volunteer foster, or maybe adopting an older dog that they didn't come there for in the first place.
This next question I'm going to steer towards Rebecca, and then everyone else can answer it, but I want Rebecca to start. So what part did owner retention and intake deferment play in your reaching 80%? And I know you all are working right now with the Pets for Life program, so I would love for you to talk a little bit more about your community outreach to help owners.
To reach 80%?
Yeah.
Not a whole lot. I mean, sorry.
No? Okay, well, since then, because I know you're at 80. I know you have programs.
We are doing we have what's called a Pets for Life program. If you aren't familiar with it, it is literally going door to door in our highest intake neighborhoods and our under-resourced neighborhoods, and offering people assistance if they want it. So free spay neuter, free vet care. We don't do a lot of free food if we don't have to, because we don't really want to turn into a food bank, and you know, free information, and we'll give people rides to the vet, and in doing that, we're also microchipping those animals, and so when they do come to the shelter, we're able to get them back home right away. We're looking at doing more adoptions in those neighborhoods too, which I think some people may be appalled at, but that's where the dogs are coming from. So there's a market there. And we're creating a vacuum by pulling dogs out of that neighborhood, and not then just having people get more dogs, and you know,
At least
it's
they're fixed, right?
endless cycle. Well,
Right, at least they're fixed if they get them
they're
from
fixed,
you.
they're
They're not getting them from
vaccinated,
the neighbor.
they're behaviorally sound, and so that's You know, we're looking at other ways that we can utilize that community. So I think it has helped with the return to owner. I mean, our intake, though, really, since we started that program, our intake's starting to go up. So I don't know that we have, the data doesn't really support a correlation. We do ask people to be, to make an appointment to surrender their pets. And I'd love to say that, you know, it's great, it's wonderful, but unfortunately, I think by the time someone gets to us with their pet, they've made a decision. They've something drastic has happened, or they've already let go at that point. So that kind of managed admission counseling is really only cutting into about 10% of our owner surrenders. Now, I think there's a good bit of our over-the-counter stray population may actually be owned animals that aren't going through that process. And you know, we're trying to find ways to determine that without alienating people. But it's, you know, treating people that come to the shelter with respect, treating people in the community with respect, and being there as a resource for them, I think in the long run is going to help us sustain a 90% live save rate.
Did anyone else have intake prevention programs or owner assistant programs?
Well, I think, you know, Rebecca's, we think the same way too. Dallas is 1.3 million population, human population. It's one shelter, so it's in one location. By the time they've ripped that animal out of their kid's arms, told him to say goodbye to it, he's peed on the couch one too many times, drove all the way across, you know, through Dallas traffic and got to Dallas Animal Services. The chance of changing their mind once they're there, it's really hard. We do have one of our groups, Dallas Pets Alive, does run a PASS program, which is a diversion program, and they work really, really hard at it. We have staff supporting them, and we're trying to do that 7 days a week. But I think Kristen said this was an Austin model, having the phone calls, and we want to get into a phone call model. We've all seen the games of places who, oh, you have a black pit bull you need to surrender because you're being evicted. Okay, we'll make your appointment 4 months from now. No, we're not doing that. If it needs to come in, if they are not able to keep it, but I think that there's a much bigger percentage that if you let it get to that last bit where they're already in your parking lot or at your front door, it is too hard. So we're trying to switch into some type of phone call based, and at longest 24 hours that we'd ask people to schedule it. So if they still need to come in, so be it. But we think a lot we could fix if we could have a conversation with them.
Anybody else? Fairfax or?
In El Paso, I would kind of agree with both of you. They to get to 80%, I really don't know that we did a lot there, but to get past the 80%, the intake, diversion, and the return to owner programs really have been enhanced. We started doing the targeted spay and neuter and vaccine clinics in the areas where the pets were being picked up or were coming from if they were brought to us with stray. We started the Finder Foster program where people found dogs that they came in. We gave them their vaccines and they actually fostered them during the first 2 weeks while the vaccines were taking place. That really is a pretty new program in the last 2 months. So we had over 100 new fosters and over 100 less dogs in animal services. The microchip campaign that we started about 6 months ago in all of our fire stations. I did the RTO class, so if you were in it, sorry, you're hearing it again. But that microchip campaign where every fire station in the city of El Paso is a place where you can go and scan the microchip and empower the community to return dogs or cats back to their owners automatically without even coming to visit us. Those are some of the programs that we've already seen results in the last few months.
I was just going to comment again on, with Fairfax in particular, the diversion was that stop accepting healthy wildlife. I mean, that wasn't really diversion, but it wasn't just that we just stopped that. We talked about humane exclusion. Humane Society, United States has great wildlife resources. Recommend you all check it out if you guys are having that issue in your community. Because there's also humane exclusion of cats, outdoor cats, when people are upset about cats doing things and usually it's a neighbor dispute, we found in our experience. But keeping healthy cats out, because a lot of times you're trapping somebody's pet. The only way we're going to accept a cat is if it's in harm's way, if it is ill, sick, hurt, if it's too young to care for itself. But if it's a healthy cat and it's fat and happy and its body composition is fine, and I mean, there's some shelters. I was the Midwest director. I'm not doing that job anymore for Best Friends, but I would go into communities and they'd have cats that were going to be euthanized with like bells on their neck because somebody brought it in and they couldn't return it to the field. So they worked to get their code changed and their policies and practices changed. So there's different kinds of diversion. I think we were all kind of initially thinking about efforts at the front door and counseling of folks that have already made their mind up to bring their pet in. But the thing I do think we are headed for, and we put our toe in the water in Austin with this, and Fairfax actually has it right on their website. They've become a pet resource center. They stopped calling it intake. Why is intake and owner requested euthanasia? Why are these two things that we're supposed to be doing? We don't do so many other things that the community needs. They need wellness help. Why is it just death that we're offering? And then, going back to the resource center piece, is they might have their mind made up, but also too, there may be things they don't know that we can share with them. And if they still are like, nope, that's what I'm doing. But there's lots of people that aren't veterinarians. They may think, they might be scared that the cat peeing all over the house is got cancer, and they don't know that there's things that they can do. So my advice, if you're going to try and do any saving before the door, and they're already on property, is to just really, really make sure that you're sharing information, talking to them privately, giving them the opportunity, and not standing at a countertop where everybody can hear what they're saying. Because I think people lie about why they bring pets in. You have no idea if they're dealing with something really awful they don't want to talk about in front of everybody. So I think if we can stop that utilitarian, like you're standing at a counter, no privacy, you're actually sitting maybe at a table and there's like those cloth panels that maybe you can recycle from another office where they actually can talk to you and you can kind of try and decipher what's really going on. And maybe, just maybe, even if it's a 2 out of 10, that pets you keep with that family, that will matter.
I know I'm not on the panel, but I'm going to chime in. So I worked for an organization that went from 50 up to 90%. And so the managed intake part of it was our number one resource to help us reduce our intake. And we found between 50 and 60% of the people that contacted us kept their pet or rehomed it. So I'm just throwing that out there.
So it worked really well for you.
It really worked well for us. And I've got all sorts of stats. And our intake of strays went down. So ironically. Okay, so the next one I'm going to read verbatim because it's a long one though. And then I'm going to open it up to you guys to ask questions. At 80%, leaders often have to assert cultural change as workers' roles shift from killing healthy and treatable animals as part of normal daily operations to trying to save new populations of pets. How did you help your team make the shift in mission and philosophy? Tawny, I'm going to throw it to you first.
Okay. Well, I'm thinking, I had mixed reactions when I started in Fairfax with this. Some people were really excited about it. And even coming to Austin, we were at like 92%, and we started saving more. Some people were really excited about that and thankful and emotional and happy. And others were, not so much because it was pushing the envelope, pushing them even further. And I think that I made the assumption, whether it was right or wrong, that nobody wanted to kill a pet that could live. And I just made that assumption. That's just the way I talked to folks. I never said, hey, what do you think? Emily, do you think if we could save some more? It just was an assumption I made, and most everybody eventually became okay with it. I think a lot of people, when I saw pushback, it was kind of like around ego and their job description. Like, what, you don't trust my judgment now? I've been doing this. This is my specialty. I know this. This is my job. And now you're telling me to go back and find a solution, or this cat or this dog shouldn't lose its life. And so it was more of, you know, when you change a job description and somebody doesn't like that change. But once they got past that, there was only one or two that really didn't want to change. And to be perfectly frank, I did everything I could to help them, but at a certain point, I didn't want to waste precious resources, and I worked to either help them make the decision to leave, or I worked to help make the decision for them after giving them a chance.
Change is hard for most people. For some reason, I think people sitting up here, we drive change, and so I don't think we're wired the same. But it's hard for anybody. If somebody tells you they want you to drive a different way home, it's going to be hard for you. You know what? Why? This is not the way that I've always done it. But I have the same assumption that Tawny does. I have a bunch of good people. I have about 200 employees. Most of them are really, really, really good people. There's a bad apple here or there. Most are no longer with us. But you just have to work on changing what is their norm. And once something becomes normal to people, it's no longer scary, it's no longer a change. So it happened when I was in Cleveland. Just, hey, you know, 60s are normal. That's what we do. We're all working hard, we're good people. And then you have to put in things for them to adjust the way that they function and the way that you move animals through. And it's the same thing in Dallas. I like to tell the story of this conference last year. One of my supervisors, Eddie Hooper, has worked for Dallas Animal Services for over a decade. He's a great guy, big, huge teddy bear. Scary to look at, but he's the nicest guy in the world. Well, he came to this conference last year, and he had never been anywhere. And he was like, I didn't even know that there was any of this stuff out here. I thought it was just, hey, we work hard at the AS. And so he was willing to open up. And I'd even told my staff, if you got to cut out early on that last session to drive back north. And he's like, there's like 3 sessions I'm trying to get into, you know, on that last piece. So trying to find those people that are excited about when there's change and new things. And whenever you're changing, there's times when you have to come in real hot and you just have to do it. But more often than not, if you can ease into it, if you can try to explain and give the reasons why you're making those changes and let people be a part of that change. Nobody likes to be told that they have to do anything, even if it's a good thing. So usually how you get that change going and inviting everybody in can help them be a part of it. And I think that's what we have going in Dallas now, is people feel like they're on a wave, and they kind of want to keep riding the wave.
I agree with both again. I'm never the first one to talk.
Oh my gosh, Paul.
So what I would say,
Sorry,
and
Paul.
a lot of people have already heard this, but I think easing the change is our job as directors. Change is always going to happen, we know that. 90%, 80% are numbers. Make those real for the staff. Make those real numbers for the, not just those numbers, but what their job entails. Have them part of your strategic planning process so that they have buy-in, and it's not just the old parks director, now new animal service directors, is telling us how to get to 90% when we've been doing it all our life, right? Story of my life about 7 months ago. Basically, what I did was I empowered our staff to tell me how to do the job that they really wanted to do already. Most of our staff actually wanted to get here. They didn't want to euthanize, you know, the 56% that they were euthanizing. They didn't want to spend every day doing that. So it wasn't that hard of a transition for that part, but their jobs did change and their routines did change and how they work changed, and just empowering them, celebrating with them, and their success really motivates them, understanding that you are in control of the morale in your department, and that it is up to you during the hard times and the good times to be the example. All of those things help your department through change.
And you know, we're a little different, because I like being different, I guess, but I'm different from all the folks on the panel because these folks all were government employees, and so they have a certain they've got it's just a different animal working for the government. I'm a government contractor, and that means that we have a lot more flexibility with our employees, and when we bid on these contracts, I mean, the organization's mission is to end the euthanasia of healthy and treatable animals in animal shelters. So it's not like the county didn't know that's what we were going to do. And the employees, while some of them had been in these facilities, you know, a lot of them, you know, came because we were there. So our employees, our teams are motivated. They're excited about it. That's why they work for Lifeline. I think when you're talking about going from 80 to 90%, what I had to realize is that even though they're enthusiastic and motivated and dedicated and they're willing to do whatever it takes, it's really hard work. And as our lengths of stay increase, as our capacity, I mean, our shelters are always operating at capacity, and our resources sometimes are kind of frozen in place, especially with county contracts. It's taking a new level of care for our workforce that I hadn't really anticipated. We've written into we're just finishing up a strategic planning process, and we're about to start on the operational plans behind it. And you know, we wrote into it that we needed to start caring as much about the lifesavers as we care about life saving, and we hadn't really considered that before. I know that seems odd, but you know, you've got a bunch of really excited people working, and then all of a sudden they hit a wall, and it's been a trick to push through. Full disclosure here, so.
So Paula, I'm coming to you, and then I'm going to go out to the audience.
It's probably the one I don't
So
know.
yes, you
Give her a
called
hard
yourself
one.
out.
Really
now
hard.
It's totally your fault. Okay, ready? So you started in April of 2018.
Yes.
And so what I'm told is your save rate or live release rate was 68% when you started, and it's now at 84%.
Yes.
Which is remarkable. So what my question is, you had to have gotten your community more engaged than perhaps prior to your coming along. How did you get the community a part of the solution? How did you engage them?
That's okay. I got that answer. That's my claim to fame, actually. And establishing relationships and involving your community. You know, as a parks director, that's kind of what you do. So that part was kind of easy when I transitioned to animal services. Engaging the community, and even the hard ones, the ones that are not your advocates, it's important to listen to everyone. And I'm going to say it again, the strategic planning process was very detailed and long and hard, and I'm going to talk about it till my eyes turn green. They're blue now. But it involved all of them. It involved the community, and one of the things that, you know, when I came in, the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee, which is in El Paso, and it's a committee that oversees all the shelters. Well, we only have one shelter, but all the shelters in El Paso. And they went from trying to go to council saying, the animal shelter's doing this, and they have disease, and the vets don't do this, or their director doesn't do this, to really going to council and backing us up and supporting us in all of our goals. And it really took a lot of one-to-one conversation, listening, communicating, compromising, and finding ways to solve and find solutions together. It is not animal services live release rate. When I talk about it, it is El Paso's live release rate. And I'll always say that because there's no way that I could have done it alone, that we could have done it with just our employees and volunteers. It is going to take a community to get us to 90%, and it took us a community to get to 80%, and our community had us back at 25% in 2013. So they're going to take the burden, and they're going to get the success.
Well, I'm going to jump out to the audience, and unless anybody wants to answer that same question about community engagement. Okay, Anybody have questions? We got.